Welcome to Retro Scale Modelling. This is part 1 of the MENG 9A52-2 Smerch Russian Long Range Rocket Launcher Scale 135. If you haven't checked out the intro video yet, have a look at it. It shows you what's in the box in this kit. So as you can see here, I've jumped right into it. It took quite a bit of time actually to prime all these 30 odd sprues in total. So the first job after priming was to make up the sachet of the trailer. So initially we're just putting in small little parts and putting in the axles along the first beam, as you can see here. On the sachet, the axles, there's two different types, and they alternate across the beam, so just make sure that you get them in the proper order. I cut them off the sprue and lay them down how they go on. Same with all the sub-assembly parts that you see here. I just found it easier doing it that way, cutting them off, laying them down how each part is, and then building each part up, then placing it on. And it was the same again on the opposite beam. Just one or two little parts to make up that, like the suspension rig, I think it is. I found putting the two beams together a little bit tricky. I'd recommend cementing as you go along on this. So just cement a couple of the axle parts and then cement it into position, and it goes in a slight off angle. That's why it's a little bit tricky, and also with so many axles to join onto the opposite part, it really is better just to cement as you go along. I didn't initially, and as you can see, I had trouble getting it all lined up and putting it into place. So cement one or two first, put them on. You may have to use your tweezers just to get the alignment, and then work your way down the beam like that. Takes a little bit longer, but it is worth it in the end. But once it's bonded, then you can start placing on the other parts on the outer edge. Again, these parts are tiny, so you'll need a good pair of tweezers and a steady hand to do this. I dropped my part a couple of times. This cross beam here, I think it might be the bumper, sort of doing it off a little bit off camera just to get in position. Does help keep the whole thing stable, and the location points are easy enough to sort out. Then it was time to paint, and I'm painting this in Rebel Aquacolor 09 Anthracite. Now this is my go-to colour for when I want a black metal. It's a deep sort of well-used colour. You can get different brands of paint that do have colours specifically for axles and sachets and things like that, but the Rebel one for me works okay. Next to be made up is the drive shafts. Now there's three of these to make up, and they're all made up in a very similar way. There's a couple of brackets you have to put together with a main canister, well, it's not a canister, the main unit going into the actual axle, well, drive shaft itself. Make these up separately if you can. Might be helpful if you number them or lay them down how the instructions are laid out on the sheet. So the first one you see there was the first one that instructed me to make, and so often I just put them down. So similar how I built the beams and the axles. Don't paint these beforehand. I would say paint them once they're all bound together. I'm painting these axles in Rebel Aquacolor 91 steel. This is just a personal choice for me. They can't. I think the ideal colour is probably burnt iron. Tamiya do a good one, as well as Mr. Hobby. But I thought I'll just paint them in this colour. I'm going to be weathering it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The reason why I painted it now was because I wanted it to be dry by the time I went to fit the drive shafts. And that's a tip for you, really. Look ahead in the stages of your planning the kit. If there's something that needs to be painted and dry before you can proceed, try and do that a good hour or so before you get to that point. That way, by the time you get to that point, it's all dry and ready to go. When you're making up these dry shafts, don't worry about thinking, oh, is this part in the right way or whatever. The MENG kits are really good. They can only go in a certain way, and the location points are slightly different from each unit you're bonding together if they look the same. You know, so just have a look before you bond it, and you shouldn't run into any trouble. That's the first drive shaft made up. It's time to make the other two up. You can see the base unit in the corner there, and it's the same as the first one, just making up the centre pieces, putting in the brackets and so forth. So I'm putting in the drive shaft into the main unit, and as you can see I'm just try testing it first, and you see me turn it around there. That was because I got it in the wrong end. Well, I thought I had it in the wrong end. So have a look to make sure you get it in the right end. There's a slightly longer tip than the other side. That's the clue on these. Again, follow the instructions, you should be alright. And the shaft itself is getting painted in Revit Aqua 91 steel, the same as the axles. You really have to paint before you place them because it can be rather tricky to paint once they're inside the main unit, so just be aware of that. So onto the main unit, and I'm painting that in the Revit Aqua 09 anthracite, like I did with the main beams. Once it was painted, it was time to connect the shafts together. Now don't be tempted to connect them all at once before placing them in. It can be a bit tricky if you do. So when you put them in, there is little contact points inside, and the brackets just slide down into it. Make sure you press them down firmly though before cementing, because they shouldn't pop up, but make sure they're properly in before you do. Before you put the last one in, there's a couple of little brackets and hinges that you have to make up, and they go on the side of the beams. Do this before you put it in because the drive shaft runs on one of them, so you want to make sure that's nice and secure before you put it in. The two brackets you see here, however, just fit over the top one, so that shouldn't be a problem. And it was easy enough to connect the drive shafts to each part one side of the three units we're in. Just a little bit of work with your tweezer just to guide it into place, and you should be okay. I'm carrying on putting on brackets now. I think this one holds the engine block, or it may well hold one of the cabins. I'm not quite sure, but it was an easy part to fit. The location points are quite easily found and laid out. There's a couple of canisters and boxes you have to paint, and I painted these in Revit Aqua 99 aluminium. They fitted in rather easy. The second one here was a little bit tricky because the first one was in. Just be patient. There is two location points that it pushes into. It's just finding the room to get them in. There's more brackets going on now, and if you see those two long poles there, these are, I think, for the steering column. Make sure you fit the brackets first before you put the assemble this part. Like the drive shaft, they run alongside it, and if you try and put the steering columns in first, you'll have trouble with the brackets. Now, these mechanisms didn't say whether they should be free moving or cemented in. They do have the possibility of be free moving the way they're built, but I found it rather tricky trying to get them all stabilised. So in the end, I just cemented them into place. It's entirely up to the builder, I suppose, how they want to do it. But once I decided to cement them in, it was a very easy process. And they were painted in Revit Aqua 91 steel. I'm just doing a little bit of touch up of paint here. The next part is the more steering columns for the wheels, and I made this difficult for myself here. Once I assembled this part, it goes in the bottom part, and I was trying to fit it through this way, as you can see, and I was making life bloody hard for myself. I was trying to get it fit. I was thinking, why is this not going in? Then I realised it's a long shaft, so why didn't I just put it in from the side? And that's what I did in the end, as you can see here. This took about half an hour of my time trying to get it to work before I finally realised, oops, I should have put it in from the side. A lot easier. Well, I'm actually going to bring this video to a close now. I've decided to make these videos on a day-to-day basis instead of doing quite a lot, then editing, then putting it on. It just takes too much time, especially when a big build like this. So hopefully I can get a new video up each day with the previous day's process. That's the main part of this sachet undercarriage of the trailer unit done anyway, according to the instructions. The next part will be dealing with the engine block, I believe. If you haven't done already, why don't you check out my other videos? Subscribe to the channel if you like what you see. Hit the like button as well. I'm sure there's things there for everyone. Drop me a line if there's something you would want me to build, or if there's any questions that you have, any suggestions. It's all welcome, good or bad, I don't mind. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Look out for part 2. Bye bye.